Years ago. This is fun. A friend of the show, David Pacman, clashed with Tim Pool very briefly on Twitter. I want to show you that. And then while I was prepping the story, it reminded me of years ago when David Pacman interviewed Tim Pool and really early exposed the game that Tim Pool would go on to play. So we'll get into all of that. But as you all know, so I said David's first show, but then Tim Pool, what would you call him? Not an enemy of the show, but I've been on his show a few times. So we know each other. And he thought he was being real clever when he first attacked Brian Tyler Cohen, saying with screenshots of Brian Tyler Cohen's recent videos, Tim Pool, who's a MAGA commentator, he likes to pretend like he's not, which is a part of what we're going to get into, but he's a MAGA commentator. But he said, I think Brian Tyler Cohen wants to have sex with Trump. And then again, the photograph I'll describe for our podcast listeners is essentially what he's alluding to is a bunch of Brian Tyler Cohen's recent videos have Trump in the thumbnail. God forbid Brian Tyler Cohen, who talks about American politics, would talk a lot about the guy who single-handedly took a strong economy and nuked it. But in response, Brian Tyler Cohen said, lol, Tim is big man. I should have mentioned Brian Tyler Cohen again in the show because he tweeted the Democratic influencers are, quote, fucking retarded for suggesting that Trump actually thinks Garcia had MS-13 tattooed on his hand. And then Trump came out and said that he literally thinks MS-13 is on Garcia's hand. Sorry that your God King made you look stupid. So that was a great response from Brian Tyler Cohen. But then Tim Pool responded to his last post about Brian Tyler Cohen and said, I think David Pacman wants it to be a three-way. That would be David Pacman, Brian Tyler Cohen, and Donald Trump having a threesome, is what Tim Pool is thinking about in his free time.
I'm gonna come.
Right. And so you could see here that, I cannot believe producer Cole played that. Wow. You could see another thing where he's posting screenshots of David Pacman's recent videos and Trump's in the thumbnail a lot.
Fucking key.
Again, because Trump is kind of an important thing right now. And David responded to that saying, Tim is still embarrassed by the humiliating excuse for a question he asked Caroline Leavitt in the press briefing room a few days ago, which is a good one. And he's referencing this.
We have an individual in our new media seat today. His name is Tim Pool. He's a political commentator and a media entrepreneur with millions of followers, a very big platform. Currently hosts Timcast IRL, a daily news and discussions show, and The Culture War, a weekly podcast exploring cultural and political issues. His programs feature in-depth conversations on topics such as free speech, censorship, identity politics, and societal change, often engaging with a diverse range of guests. He's in Washington today because we are also hosting a local media row across the street in the Eisenhower building, which is a testament to our commitment to bring new voices into the White House to cover the president and this administration. So, Tim, why don't you kick us off today?
Yes, many of the news organizations that are represented in this room have marched in lockstep on false narratives.
Why?
This floor is like a trick.
Everyone criticized Zelensky, and then he's wearing
Easily go up. You can
what
just
can
go
only
right up
be
to 24.
described as what? I don't know.
But there's these fucking things.
What am I supposed to
And it's
describe
like,
it as?
X, don't
Not
go on
a
there.
nice outfit?
It's
fine.
usually end up fighting like
Looks
a boss
good.
fight, basically.
But it's not
But we
a
don't need to
White
do that
House
because we are
outfit.
going to
Organizations that are
conclude.
represented in this room have marched in lockstep on false narratives, such as the Very Fine People hoax, the Covington smear, and now what's being called the Maryland Man hoax, where an MS-13 gang member adjudicated by two different judges, I believe, is just simply being referred to as a Maryland Man over and over again. Now, in an effort from the White House to expand access to new companies, you've created this new media seat. So I'm wondering if you can comment on, following this expansion, you've had numerous outlets disparage the companies that you've had sit here, as well as the reporters. I'm wondering if you can comment on that unprofessional behavior, as well as elaborate if there's any plans to expand access to new companies.
Sure. Well, we certainly welcome.
What was the question? Was it the mainstream media sucks, and so would you comment on that? Nice job, Tim. So that's what David Pakman was referencing. Now, what I find really interesting about this interview that was conducted 5 years ago is what David's identifying here in Tim Pool's content. He doesn't use his word, but it's maybe a little disingenuous, is that Tim Pool back then would identify himself as left of center. To this day, I don't really know. Like when I was on the show somewhat recently, I called him right winger, and he said, I'm not a right winger. And sometimes he says that, you know, if things were normal, he would be left of center. But then all of the content is stuff that's just beneficial to the Trump's narratives and is attacking liberal narratives and is putting a bunch of emphasis on not super important things to justify criticism
That's
of
better
liberal
than what I
figures
had,
and
ain't it?
not emphasizing things that are super important from my perspective, which again, you can think that this political moment warrants disproportionate criticism of liberals. That just wouldn't mean that your values align with liberals then, right? Like for me, sometimes I have criticisms of, as we've gone through, people who also identify as on the left.
That's wood
and
smoke.
I'll levy those.
Smells like wood
But
smoke.
I'll also make sure that the proportionality of my criticism matches
So now,
how important I
down
think
the
different
stairs.
things are. So in this moment, I see as a forefront issue how Trump and his movement is degrading democratic norms, is harming the economy, is ideologically a problem.
looks like more
And so
death.
that will mean when you go and look at my content, most of it's going to be directed at that. And then proportionally, based on how important I think it is, I'll levy criticism of people on my quote-unquote own side. But if you say, no, I'm on this side too, but I only ever want to talk about how deranged it is, and I never want to criticize the side that a liberal would believe is more ideologically problematic, then that doesn't seem to be the most honest expression of your political views. So just be honest. You are a Trump guy. Okay. And then argue that. That's fine. But just be honest about it. Instead of every time you get trapped not being able to defend Trump, you go, well, that's why I told you I'm on the left. I don't know about that. So here's David identifying this 5 years ago.
Position that you are center left, because like if somebody looks at my channel, it's obvious that I'm on the left and I'm a progressive. If you look at just my last 10 videos, my last 20 videos, my last 100 videos, whatever, when I pulled up your channel, I see Republicans push laws to end censorship, pro-Republican story. Facebook's purge of the right has begun.
Is that pro-Republican?
I think it is. I mean, well, so let me get to that in a second. Let me explain.
Yeah.
So I'll so conservative news added to blacklist. Conservatives are the victims. Leftist activists, not establishment Dems, but leftist activists force MasterCard to vote on banning the far right. The far right is the victim. Antifa planned armed disruption of U.S. border. It's the left that's causing violent chaos at the border. Censorship backfires on far left. Of course, far left is not establishment Dems. Another hate crime hoax exposed. That's, I mean, the hate crime, that's less politically, overtly political. Mueller report provides media, proves media is a fake news trash fire. Mostly a story being parroted by the right, although there are enclaves on the left that are saying that. So my view, Tim, is, and you know we've known each other for years, and this is not, this is just my assessment of...
All right, now before you ask the question and we really get into it, you kind of see him laying the groundwork. I just want to kind of weave into it why I think this is so insightful. Some people might wonder why. Like, why would someone disingenuously, if they actually just kind of like Trump, not be upfront about that? It's because in this online space, it's really difficult to get traction. And if you have kind of a shtick, sometimes that can, maybe you have an honest shtick, but some people want to kind of create a shtick to get some attention and to be unique. And so if you're someone who says, no, I'm really left of center, but the left left me, man, they're actually crazy and weird. It's crazy how true liberals actually support Trump. Now you occupy a really unique avenue, and a lot of people are going to want to interview you, and a lot of people are going to come on your show because, wow, even the left loves Trump, right? It gives you that shtick. It's the same thing that sometimes is honestly done and sometimes disingenuously done by people of certain identity groups. So I'm a gay person, but all gay, the gay people are out of control, or I'm trans and the trans people are out of control. You see that as well. So that's the why behind the skepticism when it seems like people are misarticulating where they really stand, but their content tells a pretty clear story about where they land. We'll go forward.
What's on your channel? That about 85% of your content is going after the left. And I totally get criticizing the left from the left. Like, I do that as well. But the overall selection is selection of stories that to me seems as painting the right in a good light or as the victims, and choosing to go after relatively insignificant enclaves of the left. Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, no, the way you see it is the way a lot of people see it, and I think you have your opinion, your view. I'll psychoanalyze myself for a second, and I think for me, I was kind of, growing up, kind of ostracized by a lot of the establishment and main left, but more specifically, again, to psychoanalyze myself, I've gone through a period where all of the attacks I receive and everything that tries to ruin my life is coming from this one group of left-wing individuals for a specific purpose. And that's naturally going to result in certain behaviors and certain focuses. So let's actually, I don't want to make it seem like a cop-out. I've been physically attacked by the left, not the right. People are right now taking a quote from Vox.com to make it seem like I'm an anti-Semite so they can get me removed from my bank account and stuff. That's not coming from conservatives. It never has.
That's fair. That's totally fair. But I guess what's important to me...
I will go through these videos, though. I will. So forgive me.
And I actually don't need you to do an accounting of each video. For me...
And then I'll pick up there. In a second here, if I haven't already said it, please do click the subscribe button if you appreciate this show and me being very upfront about where I stand on stuff. But then if you can imagine, it's not a crazy prospect. This is why I even warn all of you and tell you, please understand the incentives people are influenced by so that then you can, it's not that I'm saying you should be helplessly cynical about all the content you watch, but just be mindful. Corporate outlets are going to be maybe more hesitant to criticize corporations or criticize super wealthy people who might own their corporation, right? That's one incentive. The advertisers on a corporate networks, show maybe they're not going to want to be as critical of one of the companies that's advertising. Then for independent online content creators, what can happen is, let's say that he genuinely had an issue with the left and he was on the left, but then there was something that came up, which totally happens. It's happened on this show. Something comes up and someone on your quote unquote side, that's an oversimplification of a political spectrum, but okay, let's go there. On your side does something irrational and then you criticize them and the video goes super viral because the left wing guy criticized the left and you go, oh my gosh, I just made a bunch of money off of that. If I did more of those. This happened with the anti-vax stuff too. Left-wingers would kind of have one sort of vaccine skeptical thing, and then it would do really well, and then they would get more and more and more anti-vax. So that happens, the audience capture, where you start realizing, oh, I could have a much more lucrative career if I just started pounding these videos as the left-wing guy who hates the left.
They're not scared of me.
And that can happen in any which direction with what content starts doing well for people, and that warping. Maybe even they don't know it's happening, but warping their own political views. So be mindful of it. What things that you're watching are being influenced by the platforms that people are on, where they're just making a living or chasing money or anything else?
Me, it's more, if I look at your channel and 85% is criticisms that are what I would consider relatively niche in terms of their existence on the left, it doesn't strike me as someone whose priorities are center left to say, here's what I think 85% of my channel should be.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard denounced identity politics outright with Michael Tracy. She said straight up, it's divisive, it's bad for us.
Okay.
Identitarianism is one of the biggest things that I have a problem with due to my family history being, like, I know it's kind of a meme, but mixed. And this comes from when we look at affirmative
action. But Tim,
action.
isn't that identity politics? You're saying your view on this is informed. You're against identity politics as informed by your identity.
Yeah, it is what it is. I'll put it this way. I am not permitted. The left nor the right allow me an identity. So what that does is it kind of ostracizes me. And what I find reckless, not reckless, but what I find safe harbor, I guess, is the fact that the U.S. actually had protections against discrimination based on race and these things. So for me, someone who's experienced it from both directions, I'm apprehensive towards either direction. When I have the left telling me I'm a white male and the right telling me I'm a mudblood, like I'm not going to be happy.
Fine, but Tim, so I have the left saying I'm not Jewish, I'm white, and I have white privilege, and I have the right saying I'm not white, I'm Jewish, and Jews are a race that is really bad, and we should be really. So the fact that but that doesn't make me all of a sudden say I'm going to do 85% of my videos and criticize the left. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll stop it there, but that's another really important point, which is advice to content creators. You gotta get a system for how you consume criticism of yourself, because sometimes people can be radicalized by the radicals on their own side into abandoning their values. it doesn't matter if some deranged left-winger said something really hurtful to me. I'm not going to then run away from all of the entire political framework that I think would serve America the best, right? All the policies I believe in. Why would I run away from the types of healthcare reform or economic policies that I believe data clearly proves will be the best options?
Now I gotta drop these
Because
demon
someone on
arrows.
my side was really rude to me.
That opens the door.
And people do that. And I've seen it recently with other big figures where they start getting obsessed with their Twitter comments and then they're arguing with their own side about something that the grand scheme of liberal supporters or voters are just not at all focused on, but 0.1% of them are. And so then they're screaming about it all the time. And then they get into this feedback loop where they're just screaming at a tiny sliver of their audience, making them believe that that's their movement, and then they'll abandon their whole movement because they think that some of the people on their side are representative of the entire movement. Like we really put precautions in place. I've told you before, like Jaden does a lot of sort of going through a lot of comments, and then here's some notable ones, here are reasonable criticisms, here are positive stuff, here's kind of things happening. And it's because I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want to start getting obsessed by the loudest
So now we're
small
going to,
group in my
going to
audience
the 30th
and
floor.
thinking that that's what all of you are thinking when you watch, when a lot of you watch and would never even write into the show or comment. And then a good example of this is like whenever we did The Grudge, which was me debating with a Trump supporter on a, or not, I don't know if Trump supporter, but MAGA, right wing. And we did a weekly show together and we would argue about stuff and then try to find common ground if we could find it. And we got so many people who said, Luke, you're selling out, even though the show didn't do as good as our normal content. Somehow it's selling out still. And you're just going for like clickbait and you're blah, blah, blah. And that was really hurtful to hear, but that's not going to all of a sudden make me abandon my principles, right? I thought that was a worthwhile endeavor, and so we saw it through. And then for other reasons it ended, more personal reasons, but we saw it through. And I don't think a lot of people choose to do that. I think they let themselves be radicalized by the most radical portion of their audience. Not that I'm saying if you had an issue with the show, you're radical, but you get the point that I'm illustrating. You can garner criticism and stand by your principles at the same time. That's really important. Share your thoughts in the comments.